fear that the government has of losing control, which, of the population and what have you, and the whole fearful thing, but it really comes down to control. And so anyways, my uncle's, there's two things. He was prior to the, Woodstock generation, which you're a part of, as far as that.
Yep.
And the whole peace movement. He was actually non-nuclear before non-nuclear was cool. In fact, that's probably what got him in one of the biggest troubles, is that he literally he was doing these channeling sessions or getting his information, and the extraterrestrials told him that all the above-ground nuclear testing, and especially that was going on, was harming not only our own environment, but parallel universes. And so he said that the extraterrestrials told my uncle that he needs to figure out how to tell them, the government of the United States, the most powerful nuclear, that they need to stop, especially the nitrogen, explosions. So what my uncle did was he said, okay, and this ties into the 52 saucer smear over Washington D.C. He sent out telegrams to literally everybody, most every newspaper, about to prove the validity that what the extraterrestrials were telling him about above ground nuclears, explosions and things like that. And so it occurred, and so Truman blew a gasket in '52 about my uncle, and really he sicked the dogs on him, as far as that stuff goes. So there's this almost, I've watched all these various shows like the X-Files and things like that, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this really happened. This really, really, really happened. So anyways, yeah. So anyways, it is a kind of a combination of various different stories. But anyways.
Well, and I need to follow up on a few things that you say here because I'm writing notes as we go. I just love this. You have a wonderful way of telling this story, by the way, Chad, and that's exactly what we need to do. We need to do this more often, get into the history of ufology and how we got to where we are today, because I think a lot of people have forgotten about the importance of the foundation of where we're at today. And you're talking about these UFO conventions that your uncle held down there at Giant Rock, and literally tens of thousands of people would show up out in the middle of the desert, kind of like a Burning Man kind of a situation.
Exactly, it was Burning Man before Burning Man was cool, and people would fly in too. It was an airport, so you had fly-ins, you had campers, you had buses. So you got to look back too. This is really a great scene too, because as a little kid, you're seeing all of a sudden there's 50 people within a 20-mile radius that you're actually, that you can actually talk to out there. And then all of a sudden, there's this big dust cloud. It's like the hordes are coming in. And it was an amazing experience. And the feeling of the people that got together during that time, I have never felt anything like that. And you could feel it. I mean, the positive energy and the exchange of ideas, the exchange of what have you. Not saying that there weren't rivalries, because in every situation you have, like for instance, Adamski really resented my uncle's notoriety, and so there was kind of a little bit of rivalry. So Adamski only went to 2 of the conventions, as far as that. And so I mean, you did have certain rivalries, but for the most part, you had this almost festive, eclectic group of people, and the ideas that would go on. You'd sit there, and I was just a little kid running around there, so between the ages of 4 and 10, I'm running around this whole gigantic group of people, or Burning Man, and everyone was extraordinarily nice. And you had people had little booths and tables selling books, and you literally had, it was the crossroads. It was the crossroads of everything that we're doing right now, as far as ufology and what have you. And it was really a beautiful thing. It really was. And it was, of course, you're out in the desert. The air was clean. And then during the night, of course, at that time, the Los Angeles lights and what have you hadn't ruined the atmosphere out there. So everything was pitch black. There were several actual sightings and visitations going on out there, and there was there's been several pictures on the internet about some of the pictures and what have you. So it was a really exciting time to be around, and of course I didn't really realize how important it was. It was kind of like a thing there, and I didn't realize, like, with the work that my uncle was doing in research and what have you, and also too, I watch. Everyone watches Ancient Aliens and things like this. They talk about the Anunnaki. Those people back then, they knew all that stuff then. They were trading that information about before Stitchin, before they were trading the information as far as about the Anunnaki and the various things that were just now being more and more exposed on the History Channel and what have you, or Ancient Aliens, et cetera, et cetera. All that stuff was being discussed. It was being written about, and it was all in the avant-garde. And this is actually, in my experience, was in the early '60s. So this is going on then. But so now I'm witnessing this renaissance of this stuff here. And it's kind of fascinating because it literally was almost killed off, and I have I have definitive ideas as far as why and how they did it, and they did it through the hippie and peace movement. It was a well orchestrated thing, and part of the and also too part of the UFO movement and no nuke movement was literally killed off, especially during the '70s. People back in the day, people were scared to, scared back into jobs and more traditional churches and things like that, because we had various extraordinarily scary things that actually based on some of my research, I think it was actually all CIA induced and Black Ops induced as far as the whole fear level, because they wanted to get rid of anything that got in the way of what the government at the time wanted to were proponents of, which were of course the nuclear race, nuclear buildup, and of course the anything that would get in the way of the Vietnam War. So during the '70s, what we have is we have a situation where literally people, the whole world was moving towards more of a peaceful, I would call it almost a Gnostic, mentality, and then all of a sudden, abruptly, we go from Crosby, Stills, and Nash to disco, to Wall Street, to materialism, and the whole movement of the whole ufology literally died for about, it almost died for about 10 years. And it was orchestrated because they were so worried about that getting out of hand. And we're back to this place, but I think this time, Michael, at this time period, they're not stopping this. I mean, this is happening, and so.
No, I agree with you there, Chad. The things that we see now happening in the mainstream media, even, are just astonishing compared to, like you said, the '70s, when everything was pretty much, kind of like, swept under the carpet, and the snicker factor was there on the news if you even heard anything about it. And now things are happening so quickly. I'm amazed to be alive at this point, and I just am enjoying getting this history lesson from you and about your uncle and about that whole era of the '50s and how this whole thing got started. Do you have now? Wasn't there some kind of contact made by George van-tassle, or at least claimed to be made by this Ashtar Command or some kind of alien beings out there? Because I remember reading about that.
Well, early on, he had actually, what we did, and everyone did this. We, because in the summers, you would essentially, you would drag your bed out and you'd put it outside, And we all did that, or we'd put up cots and we'd sleep outside because the summers were pretty brutal up there, and it was nice to be in the cool. Well, my uncle and aunt Eva, they would drag their bed out and they'd put out there. And one night he was actually awakened by a entity that claimed that he was from Venus, and had asked had asked him if my uncle wanted to see his ship, which the ship was over the dry lake and was up, and my uncle said, "Yeah, you bet." And so he went and actually had his main contact with that whole thing. Now, my uncle didn't have a lot of like Georgia Dempsey, which his whole thing, and gosh, he would have these every weekend, and God, who knows about that? I sometimes question it. My uncle would have would not have all these things happen every weekend. He would communicate, through telepathic, means, through channeling, et cetera, and would be able to channel ships down where they would come. But as far as actual contact, it wasn't he didn't have a huge amount of actual contact, physical contact, but that was the one that he did, and that's really what kicked it off for him. Now, again, people, I had a very difficult time. First of all, I have kind of a science, background. I used to run, oil and gas exploration, so my background is kind of really, kind of hardcore, science, because I used to deal with seismic and soil geochemistry and things like that. So when anybody says, "Oh, yeah, I was visited by Venus," by Venusians, et cetera, my skepticism would go up because, of course, everyone knows that life isn't, possible on Venus. Well, again, as far as your educational curve, if you get in the ancient Vedic and some of the other people, they talk about these different various dimensions that existed on Venus. And so, and even though our perception or what we think is, real science, et cetera, well, you can throw all that stuff out the window when you're talking about these, interdimensional, time periods, and even the Mayans claim that there's 5 different dimensions here on, that coexist here. I believe that's what they're claiming, as far as these different worlds that are kind of, going here. Niels Bohr and some of these other people and this whole quantum physics thing. I mean, now parallel universes. It's they prove it mathematically. I mean, so now it's completely different. But when I first heard that, no, that didn't ring true. But that's what he claims, and a lot of the contactees, a lot of them claimed that they were Venusians, and how, and who knows? I mean, who knows who and what they were from, as far as or what dimension they were from. But that was what my uncle claimed, that they were from Venus. So,
right.
The same story comes to, and I don't know if you've heard the Valiant Thor, story about that. And he claims from Venus too. So,
right.
Anyway, there is.
And Valiant Thor was supposedly be a person that was in and out of the Pentagon very often.
Absolutely.
So, I've heard that story for decades. And
well, there seems to be, in fact, there seems to, again, more as time goes on, there's more and more information that comes in, and it makes more sense, and so it moves from, again, I mean, the old adage, fact is stranger than fiction, and literally that's kind of what I've been existing, and it's a good point you bring up too, as far as the sticker factor. I had a sighting. In fact, I had the weirdest damn thing. I have this weird contact with my uncle even today. I mean, there's something going on. For life of me, it's just hard to explain. In fact, he was the motivation for me even writing the damn. He'd come to me in dreams and really pushed me towards writing this whole thing and doing what I'm doing. But he came to me in a dream and he says, "Go up to the top." I was living in Utah of all places. And he says, "Go up to the top of the mountain. You're going to see a sighting." And so this was actually in 1997. So I said, okay, I'm going to go up there, and I got my hiking boots in. I went up the top of the mountain. I sat there for about an hour, and nothing happened. And I thought, oh crap. I said, this is, I thought this is kind of a waste of time, so I